History textbooks and ridiculous U.S. history teachers might say that it was Nat Turner or Abe Lincoln who started the war where over 620,000 Americans died. Let's give credit where credit is due. Let's give credit where credit is due. There were Dutch or Portuguese slimeball sailors and those guys with the wigs who had plenty to do with the sectionless divide of this nation. The Dutch or Portuguese slimeball sailors were actually to blame for unloading slaves in the Jamestown colony. Although we weren't even a nation when the Dutch or Portuguese arrived in Jamestown, they still had a major impact on a war 240 years later. Historians debate over whether the ship that showed was Dutch or Portuguese, so we'll just blame them both since they all traded slaves. Jamestown, Virginia received a group of enslaved Africans in 1607, and they are referred to in a new exhibit in Jamestown as the 20 and odd because of how they were listed on the actual invoice. John Rolfe, Virginia's first tobacco planter and husband of the Indian princess Pocahontas, wrote a report of the African landing in a letter to the Virginia Company of London. The captain of a Dutch warship that arrived in Jamestown in August 1816 brought not anything but 20 and odd Negroes, which the government in Cape Merchant bought for victual, provisions or stock, at the best and easiest rate they could. You do have to wonder, and of course we have the luxury of wondering now, years later, if Jamestown had refused the first shipment of, quote, human cargo, unquote, would the South have developed differently, both economically and culturally? If people didn't buy slaves, would they have a demand? Would Africa have developed differently? Oh, oops, that's another video. Since Jamestown did accept the shipment, and the colonists did go on to wage war and win against Great Britain, the issue of slavery had another opportunity to be eradicated and stopped. This opportunity came about at the Constitutional Convention on July 12, 1787, where the Three-Fifths Compromise was met. The Three-Fifths Compromise was actually proposed by James Wilson of Pennsylvania. What? A Northerner? The Northerners saw slaves as property and therefore could not be counted as population. What? Southerners actually wanted equal representation in the House and thought their slaves should be counted. Yep, you heard it right. They were counted as 3/5 of a person. Like 3/5 of a pie, like 60 cents of a dollar, like a little over a half a tank of gas. Unfortunately, when we look back in the history books, the Three-Fifths Compromise makes the South look a little foolish. But in actuality, the Three-Fifths Compromise messed up the representation of the Southern states in all of the House of Representatives all the way up through the Civil War. As a result, the Southern states had disproportionate influence on the presidency, the Speaker of the House, and the Supreme Court before the Civil War. Could that have made them upset? What would have happened if they didn't compromise? Some people say we would have not had one unified United States, and the South would not have joined the Union to begin with. Well, that's one way to avoid a civil war. No? As the states were developing, they actually became economically dependent on each other, so perhaps they would have joined the Union anyway. Just a thought. The Civil War could have been prevented well before the actual weapons were drawn and 620,000 men and women died. If the desperate residents of Jamestown could have found another solution to labor, and the Founding Fathers weren't in such a rush to get their legacy solidified by the Constitution, maybe we could have avoided a civil war. As far as the slaves were concerned, it's difficult to excuse the fact that human beings could ever been considered cargo and only to be upgraded to 3/5 of a person for a white man vote in the 1790s. We can do better as people, and we should have.